welcome to our webinar. My name is Amy, and I'm very excited to welcome you here today. Today's topic is better intranets and pages with SharePoint. Jazz, I'll pass it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our call today about intranets or employee portals. I'm a senior consultant at Gravity Union. I've been in this employee portal space with a background in user experience for a number of years, and I really have loved it. It's been a journey. It's changed quite a bit as SharePoint has modernized, so I'm excited to share some of those tips and design techniques with you all today. I will have time throughout this as well, like Amy said, for questions, so feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them as we go. Just in case you don't know anything about Gravity Union, here's our overview slide. We do work across North America. We have a mostly Canadian team across 4 time zones. I'm actually way over in Atlantic Canada, outside Moncton, and a lot of our team is based in Vancouver as well. We are a Microsoft partner, so the design tips and information I'll be sharing today will be focused on M365, specifically around SharePoint. There are a lot of different platforms and systems we know out there, and we do focus on compliance and records management as well. And so we work with Purview as well as a few other partner systems as well. So you can see some of that up here. So just wanted to set the stage in case this is your first introduction into Gravity Union, who we are. But let's dive into what we want to cover today, which is employee portals. And so I'll do some level setting just quickly at the beginning here, set some context, and then I'll get into the heart of this, which is going to be focused on user experience and design. That is, like I said, my background, it's my passion, but I will touch on some other topics as well, including AI. It wouldn't be a technology webinar without AI. And through this, as we have time, I'll jump into a couple of demos as well. And so let's go into what are we talking about? And first thing I'm going to do actually is launch a poll and turn it over to you. Hopefully you can answer this quickly. My question here is, how do you describe your current intranet? Is it a modern intranet on SharePoint? Is it more of a classic or an older one, maybe on premises on SharePoint? Or maybe you're using another system, another platform, or you don't have an intranet today, or maybe you just, not sure what I mean by this, and that's okay too. So let me know if you can in your responses there, and I will use that to help you maybe explain some of the topics and concepts we'll be talking about today. And so, Amy, what are we seeing here today? Most people have a modern intranet on SharePoint. That's great. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Some have a classic.
I mean, everyone has an intranet almost, so that's great.
That's good. Yes. Perfect. I appreciate that. Thanks for responding. And so I will be talking about some of the modern concepts. So that's great that you have some of that foundation. And if you are on a classic intranet, I think some of these concepts will still apply, especially if you're looking to migrate. You'll sort of see what some of the capabilities and possibilities are. Okay, so first let's start with what is it? What am I talking about when I say employee portal? And I use the words employee portal and intranet interchangeably. I do prefer, if I had my own, if I could wave my magic wand, I would say employee portal, because these are employee-focused systems typically. They are about connecting people with the news and information and tools that they need every day to do their jobs, keep up to date with the organization. It's almost that anchor or that starting place for people. They tend to be pretty structured and organized and as well branded. So they represent the look and feel and the colors, the language of the organization. So brand tends to play an important role. And there is this concept of publishing that is very common in employee portals. And so we'll be looking at communication sites today. When I am talking about employee portals or intranets, I'm generally not talking about team sites or collaboration sites, although they can play sometimes a part in that employee portal, but most often we're talking about communication sites where we're publishing content from a few authors to everyone else. It's sort of that one to many or few to many publishing model. And information, when we're thinking about employee portals, especially traditional ones, we think about accessing them through the web, through a web browser. But that information now with Microsoft 365, it can be surfaced in different places. And so thinking about channels and where we want content to surface also tends to be part of the conversation when we're talking about designing employee portals. And channels, they could be even email, they could be Teams, it could be a suite of tools called Viva, which I'm not going to have as much time to talk about today, but if you want to know more about that, I'd love to hear that, and maybe we'll do a future webinar on that. And they are also, when we think about channels, they adapt to people's different maybe devices or environments that they're in, so desktops and mobile. And employee portals are not, one and done like most things in technology. We improve them over time. And so getting feedback or comments or engagement from people tends to play a role, as well as thinking about analytics and how to use that to improve employee portals. And as well, now more and more, there's AI tools, and especially around Copilot and agents that are helping improve our employee portal. So I'll try to touch on many of these topics today, but I wanted to sort of set the stage that this is an ecosystem of tools. It's a system that does connect people to the information that they need. And if you want to, beyond words, try to understand what I'm talking about here, this is just a pretty standard sort of typical employee portal these days, built on Microsoft 365 and SharePoint. And so on this page, what you're seeing, I'm just going to highlight my mouse here, you're seeing a navigation at the top. And this tends to be what I mean by the structured side of things. So it's rolling up tools for all employees. Sometimes this is targeted, but these are really important anchors for people to get into information they need. As well, there is a collaboration hub sometimes, and we recommend this, is separating out collaboration sites or team sites into its own space. So we'll typically have a way to get over to that. And then from there, you'll see that a big part of this is around news and information, like I said. So you may surface it in different styles. This is a big sort of image or carousel. And down here, you can roll up more news. And these are all pages. And so I'll talk more about pages, rolling up news pages in different styles. Over here, it's a bit of a jumping off point to different systems. You can have some links, pretty common. And there is personalization coming through more with employee portals, things like bookmarks. And this uses a concept for pages in SharePoint called saving for later. And you can roll that up in different places, including the homepage like this. There's a dashboard, which I've called my dashboard, and it's built on Viva connections. And so this has some more personalized tools for staff as well. Things like they can create a set of quick links if you want to allow people to do that, as well sites that you might follow. And so following sites is another concept in SharePoint. And this is another way to roll them up on the homepage if you want to give people access to that. People Finder is very common, sending praise and those sorts of tools. So there's sort of this element of giving people what they need to know for the day. And, if this refreshes once a day, that's fantastic. It's typical to have once a week, the news would refresh. And then you give people sort of the anchor somewhere where they can get into their systems and tools. So that's sort of a standard model and a way to structure that. So I just wanted to give you that overview. So we kind of all start from the same place. And just our general recommendations for intranets, thinking about informing and engaging people. They're not only for storing documents, although documents do come into play. I won't be talking about this as much today, but many of our other webinars are talking about managing documents and organizing them for compliance. So check that out if you're interested in diving into that topic. We are talking about communication sites, like I said, they tend to be the core building blocks. And there's other special concepts in SharePoint. I'll say things like setting a home site is typically the home page of your intranet. And this lights up in various places throughout the platform, including in Viva. So I do recommend setting this home site if you don't have that set already. And hubs. So hubs join similar sites together and they share a set of branding. And so we do recommend at least having one hub for an intranet, sometimes multiple hubs if your intranet is larger. And I'll touch on branding as well and how that works. And then we'll touch a little bit on analytics, but Microsoft, I'd say, is a starting place for analytics. There are other suites and third-party tools where you can go deeper and get more information, but start with what's there for you because it does help you understand sort of what topics or news might be engaging to your staff, where to maybe share things more broadly and that sort of thing. And then AI, I will touch on too. And some of the AI tools, I'll just say right now, is about creation and helping people, authors create pages and content, FAQs more efficiently. And then there's this sort of cleanup side of AI. I sort of dream of the day when AI will, clean my house and do my dishes and all the things. But it's starting to come for content management as well. And so there's some tools now in SharePoint to help clean up either pages that maybe aren't being used anymore or broken links, things like that. So there's some tools like that that'll help on the authoring side of things. And this wouldn't be a Gravity Union presentation. We want to just quickly touch on compliance. I do sometimes get the question around pages and how compliant are they? Do they work with Purview? And so I want to say yes, yes, it does. And so if you are using retention policies or labels or both, they do apply to both pages and documents. Same with e-discovery. If you're using that for information requests, legal holds, they are included in the search capabilities within e-discovery. Once you get into some of the details around metadata, so if you're going down the path of adding metadata to pages, you may experience some mixed support, although it is improving over time. Microsoft is adding features to e-discovery. And if you are very focused on metadata, and organizing information and using metadata to drive compliance. Typically, we find that more in the document space. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. And both pages and documents have versioning, and both can support metadata. Like I said, you have more options with documents on the metadata side of things. So I just wanted to recap that in case anybody had questions. But let's talk about the sort of visual, fun user experience side of things with employee portals and pages. And so I do recommend for intranets typically to focus on designing and building out pages and investing time in this because they are more easily available to people across devices. They're responsive. You can build towards accessibility with pages and page content as well. And they tend to be, like I said, more engaging because people can just come there, go from a link. It's loads faster than a document typically. They're easier to scan. They're typically less dense. They're more visually interesting, and they represent your brand. So it really can give people that sense of who that organization is. And they are more dynamic, right? You can make pages smarter than documents typically. You can bring fresh roll-up information in there. You can target content, target links as well. I showed you a little bit of the personalization on the home page. Usually content pages don't have as much personalization, but there is the ability to personalize and tailor things as well. So they just tend to have more capabilities, say, than documents and be more engaging for staff. So with that context, I will now go into my 10 tips. And so I want to just give just some context here in that some of these are going to be very evergreen type tips. They are the same tips I would have given, say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But some of them as well are going to be more modern and focus on some of the user experience. So the first one is actually, it comes from journalism, comes from writing, is to focus on designing a page so that it can be scanned really easily. Sometimes I ask myself, if someone was only spending 5 seconds, 10 seconds looking at this page, what would they get from it? And can they get that just from the first couple of lines? And so with thinking about journalism and news stories, you want to have the most important information right at the top, the key takeaway is. It's sort of the general best practice. And so you can think of this like an inverted pyramid. As people go down, they get more and more details. It's also important to think about headings, of course, and breaking up your content and your paragraphs. I have this example here. It's blurry because this is what sometimes this is how they read their page. People don't really read things in detail as much. And so they skim and they scan and then they decide, are they going to look at things further, more closely? And so if you imagine someone coming to this, what are some of the things that are standing out? Obviously, it's going to be the big text, the bigger headings, as well as the images. And so that's why, as a sort of starting point, I encourage people to really think about having those headings, making them bold, making them stand out, so then people's eyes will be drawn to the right section, and not sort of having walls of text, paragraphs of text, and breaking that up with those headings. So sort of my evergreen classic point. It's always relevant. Sort of step back and look at your page and decide, is this built for scanning? As well, another thing that helps with scanning is white space, another classic recommendation here. And so SharePoint now, with some of the page layouts, they make it easier to add all that white space in and to sort of adapt your text so that you can build it into a page. So this is a fairly dense page. It's frequently asked questions, but you can see the text doesn't spread all the way across. There is some good white space, and it is a lot easier to read when you sort of have a smaller width on things. So I do recommend looking at layouts like that and looking at styles like that, where you can give people sort of that breathing room and that padding, so it draws their eye in sort of an easier way. It makes things easier to skim. As well, I'll just mention over here, there is a few examples now showing how to link within pages. So you can link, all of these would link to a different question. And so that is an option now. If you haven't seen that recently within SharePoint, is that you can create pages like this. It is still manual, you still sort of hook up these links, but it doesn't take too long. And so especially for longer pages like this, I do recommend looking at things like that just to make it easier for people then to jump further down. And okay, another new thing in SharePoint to help with some of our designing of the page and making things easy to skim is Microsoft has provided a number of page templates. And my last count, there was about 35. So there might be more now. They tend to release them. And there's a few samples you can see here, things for news or sharing information about a team or FAQs or how-tos, things like that. And I do recommend if you're an author designing SharePoint, supporting your intranet, look at these page templates to understand how Microsoft built them. And I find that they're good places to learn to understand what the possibilities are with some of the web parts and sections and how Microsoft is using images and layering and things like that to create dynamic pages. And because on that screen you can't really see what they look like, I tried to put a few of the ones that stood out to me as useful on this slide here. And so you can see one thing that's, you can see right away is that they are using different styles, different colors. Some of them are more image heavy. Some of them use illustrations. So they are something to be mindful of, especially if you're supporting a team of authors. To recommend to your team, what I would recommend is to use these as learning, but then give them training on how to adapt them for their particular brand if you are allowing people to use these, because they can create, if you imagine you created these pages and you didn't adapt them for your colors and your brand, they would look very different from page to page, right? So you want to use these as starting points and then put in your own look and feel into these. But like I said, as learning, they're really great because I do find that Microsoft has put together some creative options for us. And so I do get ideas when I look at these particular page templates. And so talking about brand, how do you adapt them so that they fit your brand? There is a new brand center in SharePoint, relatively new. It's been around for about a year or two. And when you go into your site and you change the look, you will be able to pick different themes. And you can have themes at different levels. So you can have themes that exist on a single site, or you can create themes that are more global. And these ones are the ones that we tend to focus on when we're building out new employee portals or migrating from a classic employee portal to a modern one in SharePoint Online, is we're building out maybe one or two organization-wide themes. And what you can, so how you do this, I'm not going to go through all the setup steps, but just want to let you know your administrator will need to get involved. There is an admin center step within the settings and the org settings. There's a step here to set up where your brand center site is. And so I do recommend on every intranet to have a site that holds all the brand assets together. Typically it's something called, brand or brand guide, something like that. And just put in that link, and then that'll be the place now where you manage your organization themes. And once you have that set up, once you have that configured, then you will get this new brand center. And one thing that's newer is that you can add fonts as well. And so I do recommend testing this, whatever you do. If you do add some fonts, test it throughout the different web parts, make sure it's doing what you expect. But most of the time, what we're focused on is adding in the organization colors, and then you can use them in different combinations within SharePoint themes. And you can have multiple themes here. Here, there's a couple. And when you go in and to edit the theme now, it's a little bit of a different experience. You can go in, configure the colors that you need, but then you can start adding these combinations. And this is something I recommend you get your graphic designer, your visual designer involved in helping you create the combinations that maybe you want to give authors for when they're editing pages. And they will show up when they're editing sections. They can choose these different combinations, and this will drive the colors of the buttons, the color of the background, things like that. Of course, you can add custom backgrounds, images, things like that. But these are the starting points often for many of the pages. So some of those page templates I showed earlier, they look all different. Some of those will be driven by what you put into your theme colors. So this is why I'm highlighting this and how you can start to build some consistency into your pages. As well, the other places that these colors show up is when people are editing their page, editing their text on their page, and they're picking different font colors, they will see colors coming from the theme as well. So that's another place where those show up. And with that, so that was some overview of some of the page templates, the brand, a little bit about what an employee portal is. I'll just jump over into my demo here because I think it's sometimes fun to see things live. And what I'm showing you here is just a fictional city. They have an employee portal. They have some news, some information. You can see some of the pages here, like I showed you on that slide. You can see that dashboard. When I click on some of these are links that a user can configure in their own Viva dashboard. And so they can add whatever links they want. As well, if they are, using the intranet, they're using their collaboration hub, they can follow their favorite sites, and those will show up as well under followed. And this will also roll up any frequent sites that people visit as well. So this is a personalized element here. And people look up, adding promotions, announcements, very common. I have a little bit of events, although it's not showing any upcoming events yet. And then I put in here, just in terms of some engagement piece, there's Viva Engage. And this is sort of the conversational community element of the platform. And this is where you can have some of the social conversations. So you can tie in that into your portal. But generally, if you're using this, you'll want people to engage within Viva Engage and have those conversations there. And so that's just the homepage here. I'll just show you this navigation. You can, obviously make these quite complex, add a lot of links. I'm going to go over into this brand site here to show you where the brand center is. And so, as I had mentioned, I do recommend organizations create a site where all the brand assets live. And so this would be an example of that, where images, logos, icons, things like that can all be accessible. Any templates, that's usually very common here to see some templates as well. And when you configure the brand center, you will get this link over here. And as I showed you, you can add in your fonts, add in some colors, and decide where you want to apply your brand. Currently, they apply to SharePoint and Viva Connections, but I'll jump into the SharePoint one. And you can see I have a couple of themes already set up. And then here is where you would add, all your colors, things like that. So have your, visual designer or your graphic designer add the colors that you want people to be using. And then once you do that, then you can create the combinations maybe that you want to allow people to have. So this is where you would configure it. Sometimes it can get a little confusing, but what I do like is that it does show. So let's say I pick a combination that doesn't work very well together. It does tell me from accessibility standpoint if I have enough contrast or not. So this is something I find is pretty helpful, especially if you're doing this sort of DIY yourself and you just want some advice or some guidance. This can help you sort of configure the right options for people. And so you can see I've already created a number of them as well. Definitely recommend checking that out, building this sort of modern theme. If you're still, you may be using a classic theme, an older version, switching over to this will give your authors more options, especially when using the new page layouts and page templates as well. So what I'm going to do is just go back to my site here. And the last thing I want to show you is just where the templates are, where the page templates are. And so you can see I clicked new page, and all of those Microsoft ones, the 30 plus that they've created are here, you can see. And when you click on one, you get a preview of what it looks like. So this is where your authors can explore, can learn, can understand, maybe which ones they want to be using for their particular site. And I do find they're all quite different. Some of them have more columns, fewer columns, some of them have more images, less images. So, take some time, highly recommend take some time and explore, especially if you're supporting authors with their pages, or you're looking at modernizing your intranet even more. Take some time and understand how Microsoft is doing some of these page layouts. I do find a lot of these are very dependent on images, and so I will talk about that in a moment. So having a good set of images for people to replace these is going to be really important, right? So you want people to be able to browse quickly, replace it with their own image. And these kinds of colors, like I said, they do come from what you've configured in the theme. So some of them will change depending on the theme, and some of them will not. In this case, this color is being set from the custom section background. And so in this case, I'm going to remove it if I want to use one of my theme colors, and then I'll be able to use one of my theme colors. So just wanted to let you know, sometimes you may be clicking on a theme wondering why is it not changing? And it could be because there is a custom section background set. So just point that out. But definitely recommend checking this out, editing pages, playing around with it, and seeing what you can learn from what's going on here. Okay, so I'm going to keep going with the slides. I will jump back in there if we have some more time. I did mention images, and so it's really important, especially with these new page templates that are more visual in nature, to invest in a good image library, using images from your brand set if you have that. Also just small tip, pay attention to how big these images are, compress them if you need to. Authors can also experiment with the focal points, so they can, sort of change how an image appears, especially in narrow banners, things like that, by using focal points. And then, of course, avoiding text baked in images. Generally, you want to have the text on top in a text web part. This I just show here because it's an interesting use of images. These are actually two images on top of each other. And so, you may want to experiment with that. It's sort of a more advanced operation. But Microsoft is using that more in some of their page templates too, as sort of multiple images layered on top. And then also, they make available some page layouts that are using very narrow images in section backgrounds. And so this is, again, another more advanced thing, but this could be an option for your authors if you create sort of banner type images that fit your brand, brand colors. They can be great ways to split up long pages too. People can just put them into a narrow section and just create some visual interest that way. Also, another small tip here, small icons. There is a set of icons that is used in quick links, which I really like. But I also find, especially on more text heavy pages, you may want to have access to a set of icons or an icon library. So if you have that, what I recommend is put that into your brand site as well. And authors can use that on, some of the more dense pages like this. And where do you put these? So there is, in your brand site, you'll have a place where you can put in different folders. And so in this case, we are using folders. And so what I tend to do is just break it up by having different photos or images in a library, having section backgrounds in a library, having icons in a library or a folder, and then just once you do that, you can run a quick PowerShell script and it will be available everywhere across all your sites. People will be able to click on when they're adding an image, your organization, and access all the different folders that you have for your image assets. So that's my tip for images. I do recommend taking the time and sort of figuring out how to make it available for everyone, because it does make then tailoring these pages, making them more consistent, just a lot easier for your authors. Okay, I'm going to drill down a little bit, a level down. I'm going to talk about sections on pages. So think about sections like you're breaking up a long page into different layers or like beats in the story, that sort of thing. I do recommend having multiple sections on a page, not just dumping everything into one section, because then they're easier to sort of move around, move up and down, and adapt as well. And there is a new type of section, if you haven't seen it in SharePoint, called flexible sections. So you're not stuck to these rigid columns as much anymore. You can move things around and layer them a lot easier now with flexible sections. And so I do like this, especially for creating at the top of a page. If you want to create something a little more visually interesting, using flexible sections can be helpful. And so I'll show a quick demo of this as well in a moment. Because the next thing that is related to what you would add to a page into different sections are these two web parts. They're more visual, hero and editorial. Hopefully you've seen them if you're managing an intranet. And the hero we find is really great for landing pages. It's eye-catching. It tends to orient people to your key, maybe places on the HR site or something like that, showing those key links and making it in a sort of visual way. On the editorial side, I like the editorial web part as well, because you can layer in, again, images and text, create something a little more dynamic, especially if you're giving updates on things. Maybe you have a PMO site, a project site, and you want to share some project updates. Adding one of these web parts will just create, again, some visual interest and highlight the most important part of that. So it's good for announcements. There is some flexible options as well, kind of like building out almost like PowerPoint slides. You have the ability to decide where you want your text, what you want each one of these slides essentially to look like. So I will jump over into my demo again. And we'll go over to this other site. So I have another site here called Parks and Rec. So maybe some of you are familiar with the TV show as well. And so I am using flexible sections on this page. And so I'll show you sort of what that looks like and how you can create sections here that have lots of columns, things like that. So when I edit this page, you'll see I have these sections. So here's one section, here's another section. And when I go into here, you'll see I'll be able to move things around, and I can move it around, almost pretty much anywhere. You can see there's a sort of grid that's showing up in the background. It's more dense than, your standard 1, 2, or 3 column type section. And so I can move things in different places. I can also move things behind other web parts or in front of other web parts as well. And so if I start moving this, you can see it's going behind my quick links web part, right? So I can do kind of funny things like that as well. And this it sort of gives you, I think, an introduction into how complex you can create some of these sections, but also there's a little bit of a danger too, because you can do some things that maybe look a little strange, right? And so you can see right now, this is not probably the best layout, but still letting me do it. There's also this idea where you can have things in front or behind other things, just similar to when you're creating PowerPoint or other editing tools. You might be using other graphic tools. And so you can move things around like that. You can also group different elements as well, so just make it easier to manage your flexible section. I can add different web parts like quick links to my flexible section too, so that works. So if I want to have my quick links be in 2 columns, I can quickly just make that happen. And so I do find these are pretty powerful, pretty quick ways to edit things. As you get used to it, you'll find, like I found, it's easier to create, different layouts, put different web parts together in flexible sections than the traditional kind of approach as well. And so this is another flexible section where I've grouped these 2 different rows. And so you can create almost like tables as well within your page as well. And this is my example of my hero web part here. And so I recommend also checking those out if you haven't before. You can add these tiles, almost like different slides, and move them around, move them up and down, change the order, stuff like that. As well, change what the image is, your header, call to action, your link, and all of that. So you just go in, work through the configuration, and you can create some visual sort of representation here. There's different styles as well. There's carousel, kind of gives you a peek to the next tile. or just organizing it like the tiles or different layers as well. So it's sort of a standard layout. And you'll see sometimes your flexible section will adapt. It will get bigger or smaller depending on what you're doing with your web parts. So if you need to, go fix that up. And then the editorial web part, sort of a newer web part compared to the hero one. And again, it lets you go in and configure the content over in your web part properties. So you can choose whether you have these different options on or off, right? Just as you would expect. They don't have to link to anything, but most of the time you probably are linking to something, and you can have different types of links as well. And some of these colors and styles will be driven from your theme again as well, or as well what you choose as your background. So you can override your theme by choosing different backgrounds, things like that. But yes, some of these I have added because of my theme. And so now I got rid of my image. So these are coming from my theme, but I had an image before. You saw the pony that was overriding it. So you can decide sort of how you want to do that. Hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully gives you some inspiration to check out some of the more modern web parts, modern sections in SharePoint. I highly recommend moving towards those as you build out your employee portal. Okay, so I'm going to have, I think, 4 more tips here. So I'll just try to share as much as I can. And if you have questions again, let me know. Happy to dive into any topic deeper. I'm going to touch on accessibility. There is, this is often a really important part of building up pages, is making sure we have all of the components we need, and a lot of this does come from authors setting the right settings so that their pages and their content is accessible. And so a key part of that is setting alt text on images, also using headings in the right order. There's a tool now in SharePoint on pages to help you check whether pages are meeting your accessibility standards. And so if you go in, you edit your page, you'll find this accessibility assistant, and it will go through all of the web parts on your page and give recommendations of places to improve. And so you can see it's telling me I have an image web part and a hero web part that is missing alt text. So I do recommend training your authors to use this to check their pages quickly for accessibility. My next tip here is to use page templates. So I showed you what some of the Microsoft ones were and the different styles. But in order to help your authors have standard page templates that reflect your brand, another route is to create your own page templates. And so usually when we're working on employee portals, we are creating maybe 3, 4, sometimes more starting places for authors. And usually this will be a sort of a landing page type page or a topic page, maybe a more text heavy or dense page, an article page, maybe something for FAQs, and maybe something that is a bit more visual that has more maybe hero web parts or image web parts or videos as well. And to give people sort of those options. So here is an example. When I go in to create a new page on the site, the first thing I would see if I've created or deployed some page templates is those ones that are, designed for using with this particular site and this particular employee portal. And then the Microsoft ones are still available. They'll just be down here. In the middle here, what you're seeing is just sort of another advanced option here. If you have different apps, so we often use the PMP extension to help with search. And so that's what you're seeing here. But most people on most sites would not see this. They would see this, any page templates that you have created for authors as well as the Microsoft ones. So I definitely recommend that. By default, when you start into this world in SharePoint and start looking into page templates, you'll notice, if you are very detail-oriented like myself, you'll notice when you save a page, you have the ability to save it as a template. And what that does is it saves it locally to your site. And so there will be this section of your site pages library where all your templates are saved. This is a great way to get started with using templates, but the one issue is that they don't scale across all the sites in your employee portal. And so what we typically do is we use PnP or we use PowerShell. It's a quick script to just deploy all the page templates across all the sites. And so that's just sort of another administration operation to remember to do, especially if you update your page templates over time. We typically do it at the start of a project when we're launching the employee portal, and then maybe periodically every quarter or so as the employee portal changes. But just wanted to give you that tip, because by default you may see this as sort of this option, but just keep in mind it is local. It's just local to the site. Okay, so my ninth tip here is feedback and analytics. Like I said, employee portals, they improve over time. And so one thing to pay attention, and so I try to look at analytics on employee portals maybe once a month, at least once a quarter. And what I'm seeing with what Microsoft is doing and updating their analytics is they're adding more options to pages. So they're now letting you go back as an administrator or as an author to go back a year. So you can go back 365 days with your page. And you can also see, are people sharing your page? So this is interesting when you think about channels. Are people sharing your page across Teams or email? And so that those will all show up now as views as well. So whether people are getting your content in Teams, because they will show up sometimes, news posts will show up in Teams, that would show up as a view. As well, reactions. So there's different reactions in different channels. And so it's starting to roll up that engagement element as well. And so I will look at this just to see what kinds of news topics are people interested in. I often see the ones that involve people or highlighting the good work people are doing in the organization or celebrating people. Those ones tend to be the most popular. And so hopefully you'll see that too as well in your page analytics and create more content like that resonates. I will also add that these features that I'm talking about, they do come with Viva. So if you don't have the Viva license, they may not show up for you, but they are available. I did checked earlier today as well, and they are starting to show up and roll out. And then the other thing around feedback I forgot to mention here is comments. There is the ability to turn on comments on pages. And so that is how you may want to get, in order to get some engagement from your staff, is to turn on those comments or add Viva Engage if you want sort of that robust community type feature. And the comments will tie into some of the reactions that you get on your page. And if you haven't seen this lately, or maybe you have, I'm wondering what it is, there is this option called Amplify on pages. And what that means is it allows authors, if you have the rights to do this, to promote news posts. So you'll see this on news pages across different channels. And by channels, that means email, Teams, Viva Engage, or you can post it to additional SharePoint sites. And I find this is helpful because I often will create something in SharePoint as a news post, and then I want to share it on Teams to certain channels. And so instead of having to me create it on SharePoint, then go to Teams and making sure I, put in some content on Teams and make it interesting. This is just a quick way to let me do that right from SharePoint, do it all at one place as I'm publishing that news article. And so when you do that, and you say you select email and Teams, then what it does is it gives you the options that you need to promote that particular news article across those channels. And so you can see I can share this as a full news article in email or send it as a link. And I do find this is helpful, even though I know, often we're launching employee portals to help reduce the amount of emails people are getting. We don't want to share all of our news by email. But sometimes there is this need if something's really important, or you just want to get more engagement with it. You've noticed in your analytics, people aren't visiting this page. You may want to promote this in other places like email and Teams. And I do find this is a helpful bridge as people are getting more used to finding content on your employee portal. They're still getting key things in email when they need to get it. And so it can sort of bridge the gap, so to speak. And so this is a nice option as well, just I think for ease and just helping authors. Okay, my last tip here is about AI. I promise I would talk a little bit about AI. And there are more helpers coming for managing SharePoint pages. If you haven't seen the Knowledge Agent, if you have Copilot, it is a preview feature that you can enable, and it would show up as a button at the bottom of your sites. And when you click that, you'll see a few options. And so the ones related to editing pages are approve this site or create a page. And when you click create a page, I'll start with that one. Similar to using Copilot in other places maybe, but it's a little bit more structured. You get this almost Mad Libs experience. When I did this for a news post, you can then fill in the topic of your news post, what different sections you might want. And it does work a little bit better. If you have some resources, so maybe you have a Word document or something, a starting point, you can add that as well. And then choose how long you want it to be. I do find medium tends to be pretty long, so sometimes I go short, and then it will go off and create a page, and it'll even put in a few sections as well and do its best to get content that it thinks you might want onto that page. And it will add images as well. So I recommend playing with it. But for a person like me who likes to have a little bit more control over styles, I don't often let Copilot go off and create a whole page. I will, though, use the section AI. And so you saw me adding flexible sections to pages. You can also add sections using AI. And so you'll see that button there if you have Copilot. And then from there, it's just a sort of a standard prompt. You type in what you want, and then it will go off. And what I like about it is it gives you a few options, right? So you can sort of page through based on some of the styles that it thinks you might want. It'll start to put that content together. It doesn't use, from my testing, doesn't use all your brand options yet, but it may get better over time. But I do find it gives you some ideas, some starting points, again, so it can help sort of your authors create those pages. There's also an FAQ web part. I think it's still in preview. And what this will do is it will guide you through a few different screens, few different steps to create a FAQ page. And so if you want to use this as a starting point for those more dense pages, I find that's helpful. I think I did have what it looks like afterwards. So it will create the questions and sort of in this expand collapse kind of view. So it can be a helpful way to do that. And then I also mentioned you can use AI for content management. And so this is something that is being added to the Knowledge Agent. It may change over time. I took these screenshots a couple weeks ago. But what it does is it helps authors decide if they want to retire inactive pages. So it's great for content cleanup. As well, helping them fix broken links. And so if it does find links, especially links within SharePoint that are broken, we'll highlight those for people. And then it'll use analytics to suggest content gaps as well, or search analytics too. I find the most useful features for me, especially on sites that have been around for a long time, are the retiring inactive pages and fixing broken links. Depending on how busy your search is, if people are searching or not, you may or may not get many results with the content gaps. But definitely the first one here and the third one, I do find are useful tools for authors. And so this is just a little bit of a preview of what that looks like. When you do click retire, it'll suggest, or when you expand it, it'll suggest the ones that need to be retired. You can click retire, or you can go and look at it. Or actually the snooze button is sort of like a delay. I don't want to be reminded about this for a little while. So that's what that is. But if you do click retire, this banner will appear at the top of the page, and it will say, tell users that it's not being maintained, it may be out of date. So this can be helpful sort of before you decide whether or not you want to delete the page. Maybe you're not ready to commit to that yet, but you may want to let people know, especially if it's a page that's been around for a while, that's maybe still showing up in search, letting people know that it's out of date. And it does behind the scenes, if you want to know how this works behind the scenes, in the site pages library, there is this is retired column that is now appearing. And it's appearing actually for document libraries too. But for pages, it just says is retired. And there's this check mark if you do mark something as retired. And I expect this will drive more functionality in Purview as well as Copilot. Maybe it will ignore things that are retired. So this is a space to watch for sure. I just wanted to call it out, especially for the more compliance angle. Okay, so that was my tour, my design recommendations for pages. And so these are the 10 points that I recommend thinking about or training your authors when they are shifting to modern pages in SharePoint. Thinking about the sort of evergreen points of designing for scanning, so pages are really easy to skim, they have white space. As well, looking at investigating the brand center and then applying your colors and your fonts as needed over there, taking some time investing in images, investing in different libraries so that authors can use them and scale across the entire employee portal. And then some really specific sort of points on pages is to use flexible sections, explore that, as well as the hero and editorial web parts. And then there is an accessibility checker, as I showed. So using that just to quickly test pages, building out page templates so that, again, for scale, you have consistency across your employee portal, and feedback and analytics to improve over time, and using Amplify to promote things as well, and so that you do get more visibility for your content. And then investigating some of those AI suggestions. I think those can really help sort of manage larger employee portals, help maintain them. And if you are interested in learning more, getting more details, we've been writing a little bit about pages and designing delightful pages in SharePoint over the past few months. So check those out. I have a few links here. You'll get the slides, so you'll be able to click on those and sort of check that out. And if you have more questions, there's my email, or you can drop them in the chat. And maybe I will pause. Amy, is there any questions that we want to address?
Yes, there are actually. And excuse
Perfect.
me, this is a good chance for the rest of you that have questions to pop them in. One we got, but it was towards the end of your 10 recommendations. I didn't
Mm,
want to interrupt you. Was
sure.
is Amplify a Viva feature?
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, I didn't mention that. It is a Viva feature.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. And then another question we have is, how is Copilot applied for users extracting knowledge from SharePoint knowledge bases? Can it be turned on for a specific site and all child site pages, or for specific users, or is it just on off for all of SharePoint?
This is a sort of a complex question. So depending how people are accessing Copilot, they may be able to retrieve everything that is your employee portal. So for example, I often access Copilot through the Microsoft 365 Copilot app that I have on my computer, and I just use that. And it's going to search everything. It's going to use my graph, what's called Microsoft Graph, search everything that I have access to, right? Whether that's email, Teams, SharePoint, all the things. And so, yes, your pages will be available. That content will be available in those kinds of Copilot experiences. You can also create specific agents. And so those can be deployed per site, or they can be deployed everywhere. And those agents, I find the site-specific ones, they will go deeper into your content. So it kind of just depends where you're creating those agents and what you're doing with those. I don't know if that answered the question. Is there anything else as part of that question, Amy? I
No, I think
forgot.
you got it. And I think
Yeah.
this could be
Okay.
a bit more of a discussion. So please reach out
Yeah.
if you'd like to know more about that.
Yeah.
But yes, we answered it. There's another
Okay.
one, Jazz, that I think it could be a more of a
Mhm.
discussion point as well, but I'll bring it up. Could
Sure.
you please speak to how SharePoint sites and page structure influences navigation and
Mm.
discoverability, both for humans and AI? And in particular, this person wants to know, how does site architecture and site page affect how content is indexed, surfaced, and then traversed?
Ooh,
So
yes,
it's
that's
a
a big question.
mouthful.
Okay, that's a big one. Okay,
Great
so I
questions.
will say, yeah, no, that's a good question. One thing to keep in mind is the navigation that I showed you in that demo along the top, that is separate. I'll say that is separate from the back end information architecture. And the reason why Microsoft does that is that it gives authors or admins who are managing the employee portal a lot of flexibility in how they want to set up their navigation. And so they can go in, they can edit the links, they can move things around. I can create 3 levels, even if I don't have 3 levels behind the scenes. And you can do things like that within your navigation. And behind the scenes, your information architecture is flat. The modern SharePoint is designed to be a flat information architecture, which all that means is it's lots and lots of sites. In the old days, we call those site collections. And so you have lots and lots of sites that are just basically a list. And that's what I mean by a flat architecture. And so it doesn't matter behind the scenes, how many sites you have, all of that stuff. You can just have all your sites exist as they need to be. There is an element that's really important called hubs, and hubs gather similar sites, and they have special superpowers. One of those superpowers is it shares their brand and shares the navigation across all the sites that are associated to a hub. And so I do recommend for an intranet, you have at least one hub. It's usually just going to be your intranet hub, whatever you call your intranet, and you would have all your communication sites related to that intranet part of that hub. And then once you do that, you can have a shared navigation and a shared brand across all those sites. And so it's a little bit complicated, but just keep in mind that your navigation is separate from your information architecture behind the scenes. And then in terms of AI, that is a really good question. I'm not 100% sure if it uses hubs or is influenced by what your hubs are. That is something we can go investigate. But definitely having this construct and separating things out in sites, it does create sort of these natural constructs for AI too, right? Because then you can say, point to this site, for example, when you're instructing Copilot to go do something, and then it will sort of touch on and do its high level search that it does and access all the content in that particular site. So if you have organized your sites well, I do find it's easier then to use AI, right? Because you can point things a little bit easier. That's all I
Sounds
will
like
say,
that
but it
could
could be
be
a big
a,
topic.
I was going to say, it
Yeah.
sounds like that could be an entire webinar on itself.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, a bit of a hopefully more straightforward question for you here, Jazz. What level of permissions does a person need to use all the tools you
Mm.
demoed today? So is it tenant level? Is it site level? Yeah.
Yeah, so generally authors, they are going to have higher level of permissions than say end users or viewers, right? Because your end users are not going to be able to edit those pages. So everything I showed today, I was a site admin. So I was a site admin being able to edit pages and also configure settings. So you saw me go into the brand center and see all those settings. And in order to do that, you need to be a SharePoint admin for sure. You may need to be, I don't think you have to be a global admin, but you have to be a SharePoint admin, I think, to manage the brand center. But in terms of authoring pages, you can go in, so you don't have to make your authors site admins. You can go in and sort of tailor that and make them members. You may find situations where you want to give them a few extra permissions if they're modifying any site settings, but most of the time, authors can be members in order to edit the pages and add web parts and to do all the things.
Perfect. All right. If anyone has any other questions, please drop them in. We've got a few minutes, but I think that might be everything for now.
Yeah,
I've
I think
just
we're
launched a quick poll. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and really just wanted to get an idea at a very high level on what types of content and topics you'd like to hear from us in the future. But what Jazz is showing here, we just want to let you know about some upcoming events that we're going to be at. So we do have a webinar in February. We'll be advertising that a bit more shortly with Preservica, talking about archiving and digital preservation. And then we're going to be at a few of the ARMA conferences coming up, New York City in March, and then Houston in April. So we hope to see you all there. But otherwise, Jazz, thank you for a very informative session. Attendees were clearly riveted. You had a lot of really good
perfect.
practical applications and takeaways. So you see all the love
Excellent.
coming to you in the chat here
Yeah,
with the
I appreciate
emojis.
it. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate the questions and the engagement.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.